All right, everybody, welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nichol, and we have a guest with us today. This is Mason from Notch Navigator, which is a mapping app. I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Limited to users in British Columbia, but I don't want people who are listening to this podcast to think that the tactics and the principles that we're going to discuss here are limited to British Columbia. A lot of the stuff that we're going to get into, you know, some of the features that are on Top Notch Nav are only available on Top Notch Nav. But when we're talking contour lines and when we're talking looking for different terrain features and looking for there are other ways to do similar stuff in other apps. So I think this is going to be a hugely beneficial podcast for a lot of people. And the other note that I want to make right out of the gate is we're going to be doing some screen sharing in this podcast, because I think limiting ourselves to audio only doesn't give as rich of an experience as we're capable of giving. So I recognize lots of you are going to listen to this while driving around. It's still going to be a great podcast, but if you have the option, and maybe I'll timestamp where some of the more useful visual elements are, watching this one on YouTube may be beneficial. So before we dive in, Mason, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, no problem. Cheers.
So I guess what I'm actually most interested in is, I think I can take a guess, but where did the inspiration for this, what was your aha moment when you realized, oh, there's something missing in the market here that I think I can help people with?
Well, I'd actually been doing it for years, and I guess the first moment was I'm the guy at work that basically hey, we're going out to a site out in the Chilcotin Range or something, no service for about 3 hours at least. And so you make them a map that works offline, and you just have everything that's needed: property, roads, different categories of roads, existing logging tenures and mining activity, forest cover, whatever. Is it in grizzly range? Is it a caribou patch cut sort of thing, situation? So we'd just be making those all the time as very utilitarian maps. They're very bare, not really aesthetically pleasing. They're just there to do a job, right? Everything on it has a purpose, right? And doesn't really matter if it looks good or not. Red roads mean one thing, green roads mean another, right? And so just making those, I just got out hunting with a buddy that grew up there, and he had his backroads map book, a hard copy book, and then I was just kind of in the passenger seat, and he was showing me around, and I don't know, we were just kind of just comparing, and obviously just as a mapping GIS guy in this industry, I have to update my data several times a year. So I'm always checking for new roads, new cuts, new tenures and stuff. And so basically we just kind of, I don't know, I played rugby for the Williams Lake Rustlers men's team there. And then, it's just kind of started, that was because I moved there out of university, and that was kind of my social gathering, right? It's a pretty big hunting community out there in the Caribou. So it started kind of just spreading from there, and I just started making maps for friends just for free, right? And it actually was a kind of a COVID layoff project. So basically all the contractors and everything got shut down, and I'd never been unemployed in my life or whatever, and I was started gardening and building stuff, and then I just everyone just took to social media and be like, what's everyone using for maps and this and that, and I just was on pages for buying 4x4 parts and stuff like that, and but I just was watching what people were talking about, and I was then I actually investigated and looked at some of these options, because you can't use these in industry for kind of commercial practices, right? And so when I looked at these kind of stuff, that these maps and applications that are available locally, I just remember thinking and there's a couple beers involved, and I was like, I can do better than that. There's no I make better stuff than that every day. There's no way that's maybe I can turn some heads with this. So I kind of that night, I just kind of went on my map and did a little screen recording. I was like, okay, so I'm seeing a lot of posts about this, and where to get everything in one place. So, people are searching in one directory for, property, and another one for their roads, and then relying on exclusively satellite to look for their cuts and stuff like that, right? But you don't know how old your satellite imagery is, and it doesn't really tell the full story either. So I was like, why not all in one, right? And so my map is all one flattened layer. It's not a bunch of layers you can toggle. That's just how I like it. I like to see everything at once. Some people like to kind of clean it up and see, their roads, cuts, habitat, and everything. For me, it's all just squished, one layer, It's all on at once. It's intentionally busy. It's just got a lot more. It's purposely complex, but I mean, well, it's not overly complicated once you understand it. Once you kind of get used to the legend, it actually has a legend that's like this long. But that's only because I add descriptions to it to kind of make sure that people know, like, what tenured roads even are. What's the different categories of tenured roads, and what happens when they retire a road permit or something, right? So just a different approach to it. And especially noticing, like, I think a big one for people is that with the clear cuts is the actual having the date on it with, like, just so you know when it's the green up is, because so many, like, you could be going for these cuts and the road might look fine, but after like 10 years, it's going to be like young juvenile pine and it's just jail bar. You can't see through it or really do much with it, let alone walk through it, especially. And so, I mean, you could if you want to, right? But personally, I would just save myself the time and skip them, right? And if like an area was logged in the past like 10 years, then that's if you know that that's when it was cut, then that's when the road was done, and it was probably done even after that to maintain it while they plant it and make sure it's growing back okay, and maybe biologists going through, right? So as it's just turned out to just be a system that no one was really using around here, and I don't know, I think it's pretty applicable and pretty easy to understand for a lot of people, whether you're just looking for a view or going for your spring bear or hunting season coming up. If you want to make sure you have a backup plan if, like, someone's camped out in your spot or something.
So, the other thing that I want to throw out here really quickly before I forget, and I'll make a post about this afterwards, Mason was good enough to create a discount code for the podcast listeners. So if you use Mindful Hunter, all one word, it'll get you 20% off, and that's good until, I believe, the end of July. So obviously this is going to go up in a week or two, so give everybody a chance to get that. I want to be very clear. This is a straight up discount code. This is not an affiliate code. I profit in no way, shape, or form. Mason was just a good guy and wanted to show some love to the podcast, so we greatly appreciate that. Maybe the next best question to start is, talk about the platform of Notch Navigator, because we were having a little chat off air, and I actually loved the way you put it. I wanted to build maps, not apps. So functionally speaking, how does one use and put Notch Navigator on their phone?
So that was kind of the initial challenge, because it was basically just a lot of data, right? And you want it to be stored locally. It's not cloud-based. It's just a file directly on your device, right? Which is that's how you will always have access to it, right? So you don't want to, be caching little tiles and walking off the edge of your map, or, you have to, I don't know, you make a game time decision that, I'm not hunting here today or something, and you don't have the area downloaded. This way you can it's the whole province of BC's, I've managed, I exported at a scale of about 1 to 25,000, and it's about 21 gigabytes for the entire province. And, but all of the individual hunting regions, are under 4 gigabytes. So they're usually the smaller ones, like Vancouver Island, Lower Mainland, Region 2, Thompson Nicola, Region 3, and the Region 8 Okanagan and Kootenays. Those are all like relatively smaller compared to regions 5, 6, and 7, which are just absolutely monstrous. So those ones are subdivided in themselves, like 7A, 7B, Fort Nelson, and Ominica area. So basically how it works is on my website, it's just cloud stored there. And basically a user will just have an account. You just open it, and then it'll show all your files, regions 1 through 8, and then you just download the ones you need. So it's stored there for you. If you you don't want to store all 21 gigabytes on your phone or something, you have like a picture storage problem, like most iPhone people I know, just have like no space. So then, you could just download it to your phone, just the ones you need, and then import that. I keep the southern province just because I'm always flying back to Alberta to visit family here and there. So like I was saying, I can keep the whole thing cached for when I'm on a flight, and then just throw it in airplane mode and just watch myself cruise over the landscape and kind of pick things out. If you get a good reference point, like a power line or a mountain or, kind of glacier or something like that, it's pretty cool to kind of do that kind of comparison from above. No, most apps actually do or already have the ability to cache files offline, but it's basically you have to do it ahead of time. Obviously, like you select an area and you cache it, and it'll just be on your device, and you can clear them and so on. This relies on like downloading cloud-based data, right? So it's going to be calling into like the Mapbox server or whatever imagery source it's getting the data from, whatever data you're trying to cache. right? And some data sets aren't even available to take offline directly, like some of the stuff from the BC data, like government of BC, for example, like just, forestry data sets. They're not like, you have to basically have a hard copy of it and, be able to use it. And, if you don't have like specific formats or mapping software, that kind of know-how, then you're really going to want something that, already has it done, which is, kind of what I'm trying to do, is kind of have like a all in one layer, just make it easier for everybody to basically just get it imported. It's a little bit unconventional, obviously, because it's the common thing is like, yeah, how do we use your app? I was like, it's not an app, it's a map. And
so
really,
what are some of the apps that people can use that they'd be familiar with that they can import your data into?
Okay, so here I'll just share my screen quick. It might make it a bit faster. So here's the website. So I just go here to the GPS maps and I pick something. And
Oh,
first
hang on
thing,
a second. That's not sharing yet.
oh, sorry. Here we go. You need to click OK.
There we go. Perfect.
Is that
Beautiful.
better?
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
So here's the website, and I just you pick the package you want, just full province. And basically, I have it so it directs you to whichever the correct format for the app you want to use. So Gaia GPS is, of course, the most popular. I'd say the vast majority of my users are using it on Gaia GPS. And for the screen recording, I will be showing that demo as well, showing on Gaia, just because it's the most familiar. This is my tablet off screen, but it's sharing for you there. And then there's Locust Maps. So Gaia is available for Android and iOS. So it's good for iPhone and iPad users. It also, you're able to mirror it to your head unit if you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which is good if you have like a modern vehicle, which most do. And it's actually kind of handy on that one. Just have it hands-free. Rather than like drilling holes in your dash with RAM mounts and all that stuff. And it's more, that's just for getting you there. Locust Map is good. It's good value. It doesn't have like a yearly subscription. At least the old one didn't anyways. I think they have a new version that does have an annual subscription. Not as much as Gaia, but it's Android only. And it is kind of like the Swiss Army knife, I would say, of mapping applications. It doesn't have like the 3D tilt view that Gaia has, is one big difference. But what it does have, I found, is like just a lot of really well thought out features. Maybe I'll be able to show you guys later on, but it has like kind of like Navionics, if you're familiar for using that application on the water. It shows your actual bearing of like a line going straight through, just so if you're cruising in a boat, it's like, and you want to be going to a specific point, it'll carry that line straight through like your actual position indicator, and it would just go straight. So you know that you're actually still, your bearing is still pointed at the cove or bay you're going to. And it also has things like kind of distance circles. So it'll have like rings around your position. So you can just quickly check, okay, that's within 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers. So it's a good way to just quickly check what that distance is around you. Rather than using measuring tools, you can just do it visually. So yeah, just moving on quickly. That's too much time on Locust. OSM and is also available for Android and iOS. It's kind of a newcomer, but they're making a lot of changes all the time. I like it. It's a smooth interface. They don't really have as many options for data locally that I would really use. So when I'm using OSM and I only use my maps while it's in it. Backcountry Navigator. This is actually a pretty cool one. For those of you that are ham radio users, Backcountry Navigator can actually call in location beacons from the APRS app, so that you can see other ham radio users' locations while you're using it, as well as using Notch Navigator maps. So that's its kind of shining function. And then the other ones are basically just kind of there because they're also compatible if you want to use it. Oryx maps like $10, right? Canada Topo maps, another 10. I'm not biggest like fan of the interface themselves, given the other options. And Guru Maps is also available for Android and iOS as well. It's a good alternative. A lot of people use it internationally, and it's slowly becoming more popular here, I think. Yeah.
Perfect. And I want to say, as an end user, I will admit at first it was a little confusing, but just to kind of set everybody's mind at ease, the instructions on the website were incredibly clear. And once I understood the concept that, these are a series of layers that I'm importing into my map, I use Gaia GPS. Another nice function with Gaia GPS is that it has a transparency slider. So you can have the layer turned on, And then as you bring the transparency slider to the left, the top-notch layers become less visible and the satellite imagery becomes more visible. So it's great because sometimes, let's say you're going to look for a ridge and you want to know if it's a good glassing knob. The topo layers in Top Notch will give you a great idea of what that terrain feature looks like, but then you can quickly slide that transparency layer and boom, oh yeah, great, there's no forestry cover up there, I'm in the subalpine, I'm going to be able to see really far, or whatever the case. So that's the other, and I haven't used most of the other apps, so they may have something similar, but that's something I found incredibly practical with Gaia. And there's some other features about Gaia. I find it's just such a widely used app. There's some other people who've released some toolkits, so it's nice not to have, like most other people, I'm sure, like I regularly use 3 or 4 mapping apps in any one given trip. Right now, Onyx, Fat Maps, and Gaia all seem to offer me slightly different toolkits that are beneficial. So now I think the next thing, and maybe your earlier suggestion that the legend would be a good way to do this, because the other question you ask at first, like, okay, well, what's different about this than just what you would get off of like a Canada topo map that you would, load up in any other, what's that other one that's really popular? The one that you load the PDFs in? It's called Avenza. So somebody could ask, okay, well, what's the difference than just buying Avenza and buying the, 1 to 10,000 or 1 to 100,000 topo map? And I think the thoughtfulness for the hunter, and it's one of those things that you don't even realize until you start playing with the feature set. And I don't want to like go get too far ahead of myself, but the stuff you've given about aspect for Clearcuts this year and some of the different winter range stuff. So maybe, what do you think is best? Should we just do a quick walkthrough of the legend and that would, kind of highlight some of the additional information that's present in Top Notch that's not present in other mapping options?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and do both at the same time here. I'm not an expert at screen mirroring while podcasting and using my computer at the same time, but we'll see how this goes.
Well, so far so good, man. This is going to be one of the best visual podcasts we've done yet. So this is perfect.
Oh man, well I was on another one and we're just talking about maps and I was like, so I color code my roads and listeners are just driving their truck like, okay. Yeah. So totally. I'm glad you're receptive to that because honestly it is a visual product after all. So the big one, so the biggest thing, so there's a lot of just recreational stuff. So here's something I added this year. So it has just like things like for just touring around, right? Recreation sites, government rec sites, campsites, if you want to have like a kind of a truck in, that kind of camping. One guy was making fun of me. He's like, I don't need to know if there's bathrooms at these rec sites. It's like, I know you don't. It's data that was available. Yeah. It's like, that's a prerequisite for some people's girlfriends. Who knows?
I've got a 7-year-old kid, man. That is useful information. If it's there, I'm going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. Highway rest areas and stuff. If you have like dogs or something like that, you'd be like, look, like someone's like, pull over. I'm just going to jump in the ditch. It's like, look, it's only 2 kilometers away. I know it's there. I know it's coming. Like, just wait a second. And you're not just telling people to wait and having them freak out at you. So another one I added, I was a little cautious about it just in terms of I made sure I talked to some government reps just about a liability thing. But I've added 8 gates this year, but 24-hour emergency rooms. So this one, it's not only just hospitals. Let's say you're out in the Chilcotin and you're out in Hanceville or Anaheim Lake, right? The nearest, if you axed your foot or something, and you were just like, oh no, I'm like bleeding pretty hard, I need to go to the hospital, and you think, well, I'm going back to Williams Lake General Hospital, but that's actually like 2 hours further away than Alexis Creek emergency room, right? Okay. So there's 24-hour emergency rooms and emergency rooms that are like manned at certain hours. So just kind of having these on there, at least there's something nearby. If you're in like Gold River or Zabalis or something like that you don't have to go all the way back to Campbell River just to like get some first aid. Right. So I just like, I like to have that on there, and I make sure every time I update these maps, I make sure to double check it. They're not just going to close one of these and I'm not sending some dude to lose his leg, am I? But anyway, so the next one underneath, as I found interesting, is waste discharge points. So if you like to fish or something, I spearfish, and if you knew that there was like sewage being just jetted out into a body of water or something like that, would you still eating
Right.
crab and mussels and stuff like that from there. So in BC, when there is a waste discharge authorization, it becomes public record with Latin Long. So I found the spreadsheet and I was like, you know what, that's cool. And it tells you what kind it is. So is it wastewater effluent? Is it a refuse dump, airborne effluent? And then there's just actual hazardous waste, right? So a lot of these you'll just see in city areas, but sometimes you'll see wastewater effluents like coming from, I don't know, you'd be surprised. It's you'll just have to kind of take a look and figure it out for yourself. There's like for example, like in the lower mainland, people like Harrison Hot Springs, right? There's a little area called Hobo Hot Springs, and it's just like a little pull out off a path or something like that. That's just like natural, I guess, but it's also right next to the sewage treatment thing. So
No
and I guess
way.
like depending on the water levels, I don't know, like you know, I would rather know. I don't know. Some people are
Yeah.
like, I don't need to know where these are. I feel if you're soaking in it, and you get a that's not just algae. I don't know. But
Wow.
so yeah. Anyways, that's a feature I've been I added on, and I kind of like I often I have some of these in mind, but I don't add them in right away. And so, for example, I used to have trap lines on here, but it didn't really kind of get like we had like a couple guys that did it, but I ended up just making just the few guys that are actually have trap lines using my maps. I just made them a custom file. Like, hey, just give me your trap line number, and instead of having trap lines cover the entire province, I'll just you'll have yours. That's good enough. So back to the maps themselves. So this is kind of like the most useful one that my map shows. So I use a road hierarchy, and so it basically starts with public maintained roads. So these will be on the very top, and they supersede all the others in terms of like maintenance and reliability. So those are basically roads that are in any shade of red through orange. And public maintained roads have like an obligation from the government to be maintained, right? It's public. That's what your taxes pay for, right? They're not tenured forest roads that are like basically a permit is held and maintained by a licensee, like a forest licensee, like BC Timber Sales or West Fraser Tolko Mills. So when you see these orange roads, that's like okay, there is like there's resources going into it, right?
Right.
And one thing I don't think I showed on my maps, but there's a road surface code. So you see how there's this dashed line through the middle of this orange one? That
Yep.
actually indicates that it's gravel. And if it's solid, just orange, then it's paved.
Okay.
So if that's good for like dual sport people and people on motorcycles doing long tours, like this map for this brown road, for example, that one's paved, and then these ones off to the side are gravel. And so yeah, so most other maps they just show roads as roads. They're just roads are black. End of story.
Yep.
Like they might do a little bit of a change in thickness or whatever, but it doesn't really tell you the story. And kind of what I really focus on is the road tenure, and ownership. Because the people like, well, there isn't really like a a dictionary of active and deactivated roads. Really, it doesn't really exist
And
in
like
that
coming from a
form.
background of forestry, deactivated and reactivated and in permit and out permit can mean so many different things in the practical application. Like even a deactivated road, some with minor water bars are completely drivable in pickup trucks. No
Yeah.
problem. And other ones will have these tank traps at the beginning that are like you couldn't get a quad down. Like it's just, they nuked they've pulled all the ditch material back onto the center line. Like they have just destroyed, any version of a road that was there. So you got to do, 100%. You got to take all that stuff with a grain of salt because it means so many different things in the practical application of those different, I
Yeah.
guess, authorization levels.
Exactly, right? So that's kind of where I was like, you know what, the 10-year system is the best way to do it, like,
Yeah.
in my opinion. So what that means is basically, people kind of use the term Forest Service Road as a kind of all-encompassing term, but it's actually a kind of a category of the resource roads. So that's what I have is these green ones. They're typically used more as like kind of main lines,
Yep.
the actual Forest Service Road definition. And so that falls under like a tenure, right? So if this road, I don't show, it'll be basically these black roads are no longer under tenure, which means they've been retired, right? So no one has the licensee or whoever initially held the permit to put that road in. They retired it and they basically like just returned it to the crown. That's what that means. So no one's going to brush it. No one's going to grade it. No one's going to resurface it or do anything like that. So you can expect these roads to just be like just probably overgrown, maybe good access, right? But so those ones like it's good for trails or walking, quadding. Kind of up to you. So that's kind of the interpretation there. So it goes in this order, remember. So public maintained roads, it's green FSRs for your main lines, and then road permit. Now these are kind of the most interpretive one of the bunch between this. Basically, you'll get the most. You have to do the most analysis, I guess, guessing between the purple and the black roads, because the black roads are basically just retired permits. They were built at one point, but no one has any kind of vested interest in them anymore, right? But the permit, if a permit's still held by somebody, then they might be going back in like 6, 7, or 8 years from now. So they might just make sure that their culverts aren't getting washed out or whatever. Like they might actually put some effort into making sure the integrity of these permits are still in place. So basically, you can see here, I have these clear cuts marked. Oops. And so what you're seeing with these blobs is these are clear cuts with the dates that they were logged, right? And so I show clear cuts that are logged within the past like 15 years or so. And then once it's over 15 years old, I just basically take it off the map. So then when you see these little black roads, there's probably a cut that's well over 15 years old, and it probably has like 50-foot trees growing out of it, right? And like what for me, anyways, for my application, like you can, if you want to go hunt through the thick stuff, like, you be my guest. If you really want to try and like push your way through that, but sure, like you just don't really have a good line of sight or visibility. But if it gets you to like the thicker forest, like the better forest cover, like with more mature timber around where you can actually see, then sure. Right. So the green ones are within the last 5 years, right? So they have these 2018 cuts. And this might be like it depends on like the tenure of the company that does it, but they don't have an obligation to show the roads within the clear cut in this area. So it looks like this one just goes right up to the boundary. Just kind of, I think that's a BCTS thing. I don't know. The other companies do it too. But yeah, so then you can kind of see that this purple permit coming off of this like public road here, Big White West, right? And this permit road kind of comes up and it goes to these blocks. So you kind of it's good. And the blocks themselves, 2018, that's like within the last 4 years. Like so that road's not going to be super overgrown, and especially if you're in the interior. Like if the Okanagan, this area is pretty dry. So the regeneration of like the kind of saplings and stuff and brush on the road won't be nearly as intense. Like you can probably push 10 years in the interior for like some of those roads, but on the coast, like maybe sometimes even under 5. Right, depends how close.
Especially given how the weather's been. Like when we had all that activity 2 years ago, like the vast majority of smaller block roads and stuff just got annihilated.
Yeah, exactly. I have just a quick video demo here. I did this the other day just to kind of make a point. Cuts. I'm not gonna put the audio on unless you want to hear Jason Rao's golden voice. But so yeah, here I'm using one of these roads just to kind of get to this clear cut. I'm using Locust Map in this screen recording. So, and I obviously just sped it up to like sync. This is real, but it's not exactly in real time. Syncing it up, it just wasn't worth the effort. So brought my UAV out, and basically right where that green road ends, that's where these deactivations were. And I was gonna try and pull through it, but there's like they just kept pulling culvert after culvert after culvert.
Yeah.
So here you go, right? And this is kind of what you expect to see. Like, oh, sorry, here we go. Like, this road is cut in the last basically 2 years, right? Well, 3. Yeah, March 2020. And so you basically it's been planted, so those saplings are probably going to be maybe like 12 inches high. Right, and you have a pretty decent view of what's around, so it means you have a good view into your tree line. It's not going to have too much just alder and like deciduous growth coming back. I was actually surprised how little was up there even for 3 years, given that this is Vancouver Island after all. But the road itself is pretty good. So I knew leading up to this 2020 block that this road Mario 05 had been done during that time, right? So you can tell just looking at it here that this road's like pretty good. It's not perfect, obviously, but nice, easy to drive. Didn't even mark up the paint, right? So that's what I'm usually going for. And if you can connect as many of these as you can in a row, then you know that you have like if I'm like just doing a quick like truck scouting thing, then I just basically try and connect like 10 of those blobs at once, and just so I can just keep going, right? And I would go check out all of these, and I know I can just look. And, you might even just see someone's tracks and be like, okay, all of these are off the table because it's being hunted out right now.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how I use that. So yeah, the road tenure in combination with these clear cuts is a really, really good system for kind of planning access. And that's kind of like step number one is, I guess, figuring out your access. Where's your like insertion point? If you're getting out and doing like a walk-in multi-day thing, then, it kind of starts with like, well, your starting point, obviously. So like, where is my nearest road access and so on.
Yeah, and I'll make two additional points here. I almost like the descending order of the hierarchy gives me a descending order of reliability. Like if it's bright green, there is a 99.99% chance that that is a highly drivable, excellent road. Like they would have had to have some type of incident, like a washout or a lightning strike and a tree fell, or, right now the pipelines are in there. So there could be sometimes resources get priority over access to these roads. So there's a bunch of roads right now that are just completely shut because the pipeline's in there and they're not going to let you drive on them. But unless something cataclysmic has occurred or there's some type of regulatory, influence, you can 100% drive on the green ones. And then as they descend in color, your level of reliability kind of goes down from there. And you're like, your probability of getting to the end of it just kind of keeps going down. And it's like, you got to I'm happy planning that the green ones are clear. Everything else, I want a bit of ground truthing too. And the other point I'll make is that another benefit of the sliding transparency layer is depending on the age of your satellite imagery, lots of times you'll be able to see the block roads. Because one thing that's quite nice is like, well, sometimes they build block roads depending on how they're logging. They'll build block roads right up until the edge of the timber, or they might build their landing 200 yards from the edge of the timber. And you're going to have to, if it's a 5 or a 6 year old block and you're walking through dog hair for, that'd be more like a 10 or 12 year old block. But that could be you might be better off not even going into that block, because walking through that block is going to be so challenging. You're better off actually just walking up from the bottom through the mature timber, because you're going to make better time. But there's a prime example. You're going to be able to get, again, it doesn't tell you the quality of the road, but it tells you that the road is indeed there. And I will say, for some of these deactivated, aldered in or grown in roads, once they hit that, I don't know, somewhere, depending on the area of the province, once they hit that 10 to 15 year mark, you're better off just walking through the timber. They become so terrible to walk. Like your brain thinks there's a road here, I'm going to make better time. The reality of the situation is you're not. The timber is going to be so thick and so dense, you're better off just walking through the timber up the side of the block or something. And that's another, I hate getting sideline in tangents. I also would not walk within like 50 to 100 yards of the edge of a cut block, because you're going to get wind effect, and the windfall coming from the edge of the cut block is going to make that just a terrible place to walk. So you're going to want to be like 150 yards off the edge of the cut block, so that none of that timber that's getting blown over on the edge is windfall that you're going to have to walk over. But like another practical application for me, and I was texting with Mason about this earlier this week, is that I just got a quad. So I'm actually looking for roads that have been deactivated, because I want there to be a barrier to pickup trucks access, so that there's less pressure. So only people with quads are going to be able to access this area. And so my searching kind of starts at the black roads. Like I'm hoping to show up and see a big water bar at the beginning of a black road, because that means that nobody's going to be driving down there in a pickup truck, and I'm going to be able to get 2 or 3 miles away from everybody else who doesn't have a quad. So this added detail is so beneficial once you have a rough understanding of like how resource roads are treated in British Columbia.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not a given, and it obviously works so different even from province to province, right? It's just
Right.
that the data is managed differently, the submission process is different. So like it is it's kind of a niche thing, I guess. But I mean, we do have just some of the best hunting in the world here, right? So and like the way what public access to these roads works is it's different in itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing you kind of mentioned with the that I thought just is interesting, because we were looking at it, is I always forget to add this to my legend, but the right of ways on Crown land, anyways, is shown here. So when you're saying like pipelines and or just whatever kind of right of way easement, It's pretty good for, I don't know, a lot of people find their bears on those.
100% beautiful
nice
bear country,
open for
especially
green up.
early, because you're going to get your snow melt happening in there first. And when right now it's kind of tough because the bears are literally everywhere because there's grass everywhere. But a month and a half ago when it's first greening up on those sections, that's a great spot. And it makes a nice day of hunting. Like you're just walking through a nice open area. Like it's kind of pleasant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going straight too, so you don't really have to set your bearings, kind of what's going to happen.
Great place for newcomers too, like people who don't have a lot of experience hunting. Real hard to get lost as long as you don't go into the timber. Like you spend the first 3 or 4 hours a day walking down the line, have your lunch, turn around, spend the rest of the 3 or 4 hours walking back to your truck. Nice safe day in the woods, going to see lots of stuff, going to be, quite interesting.
Yeah, one thing I will say, I used to do high voltage power line inspections, and I've seen just some comments that are just alarming, but be really careful if you're sighting in your long range rifle on the corridor. Like if you see guys in there, I don't know, like it is technically an active work site and it could be at any time. Like a guy could just be coming through. So, that happened, right? We came up in behind these guys that were basically, we come around basically over this mountain doing like going from tower to tower. And then there's these guys that were shooting, just sighting in their long guns. And I was like, cool, but also kind of not, like, but I mean, where is safe, right? I mean, I don't know. I saw someone like recommending it too. And I was like, I don't know, man. Anyways, that's I
think that's a valid note of caution. Okay, so one of the things we want to talk about at e-scouting, and I don't want to get off the legend just yet, but what I do want to highlight is that this is what I would consider e-scouting 0.1. Like finding out if you even have access that's going to get you within walkable or quadable distance of your, targeted area is my first step. And so finding out, this is exactly where I would start. I'd be looking for some point of interest somewhere that we'll get into later on here. And then I would reverse engineer the access that I needed to get me as close to that point of interest as possible. And that's going to be dictated by the quality of roads that I have between me and wherever I'm trying to get.
Yeah, like let's just say right by this 1400 contour. So this is for the Americans in meters, obviously. So that's what, like 4,000 feet.
Yeah.
Is that right? I think so. Just this little watering hole right at the top here. It might be a good spot, right? So, but that you can get to this 2021 Clearcut here. You can get to there, but this, like, it's all just retired roads. So, there isn't anyone driving around there, right? Maybe a little bit up here. No, I don't think so, right? So, if it were me, like, it's pretty decent elevation. I would check this out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you can get here, so that's pretty close, and it's pretty steep, but it flattens out here on the top of this hill. So, that's I don't know, just right in front of us example, anyways.
Yep. No, that's great. Okay, let's deep back to the legend.
Yeah. Okay, so roads covered. Kind of skipped ahead and combined them with the Clearcuts, but it's relevant.
Let's touch on trails for a second, because that was something that's been very beneficial to me, because I've actually been looking for, like snowmobile trails, because they make fantastic quad trails when there's no snow, and they tend to show up under that last item in the legend.
So here's one, Okanagan High Rim, I guess, right? So sorry, I'm covering the map. So basically they go underneath the black roads, because often the black roads are trails, but they're not tenured, right? But it's kind of a tricky one when they basically show old roads end up becoming trails, and then they end up being maintained by recreational user groups.
Like if you ever thought to yourself, wow, this is crazy. How did this trail that's like 6 feet wide get up here? Exactly. It's because 40 years ago, it could have been a mining claim. It could have been some type of resource extraction, but somebody, had equipment and built a road. It's wild how grown over things get, and how hard to believe something is man-made when it's 20 or 30 or 40 years old. And it just looks like a perfect 4-foot wide flat track in the middle of the forest. But trust me, those do not occur naturally. Like that was somebody built that and then it's just grown over. And now people are maintaining it as some kind of trail.
Mm-hmm. And the Chilcotin, we used to sled in on these old wagon trails actually.
Oh, wow.
It was super cool. But yeah, they were even shown on the map, but you know what I mean? They because at one point they were old wagon trails, but then my boss was from Clean, and he was telling me that they basically just used it as a road at one point,
Right.
and then you know now it's in the system, and I was like, oh, crazy. So yeah, so a lot of these I haven't really distinguished between, you know, I have so many things on the list, but motorized, non-motorized trails. Would be a good one to kind of know anyways. But, you know, you can probably just walk up to it and be like, yeah, this is a hiking trail.
Yep. Yeah. And where you are as well, like I was looking at some stuff in and around a provincial park, and it's like, as soon as you start to getting like kind of touristy and well posted and really nice parking lots, like start to assume like, yeah, this is a hiking trail. This is not something that I'm going to be bombing down on my ATV, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so trails, yeah, there is a lot like on the I've combined the trails from the tenured kind of government and user group trails with just some that were, as long as like, for example, I took some from just user submitted stuff, so I shouldn't be pointing out my own data flaws, but oh well, that's at least I'm earnest about it. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, so trails, that's all I really have to say about that, to be honest.
Yep. They're really handy and something, you know, as a new quad owner, I've found very beneficial. But again, take everything me and Mason are saying with a grain of salt. I would say your at-home e-scouting is where you start to ask all your questions, and then getting out on foot, on quad, on truck is where you're actually going to answer those questions. So don't ever assume, because things change very quickly out there, that just because it's on the map means it's accessible. You're definitely going to need to go ground truth it yourself.
Yeah, so for the hunting maps, what I've shown is that we're, you know, for just using firearms or whatever, municipal limits, city limits, it's a good one to have. I don't really... Sometimes no one comments on the stuff that goes into it, and it's just like, well, is it necessary or not? I was like, you know what, it is. To me, that's fine. There's no point. There's no point in not having it. So first, there's private property. That's pretty straightforward. I think that should be just a bare minimum for everything. Really, I don't know why it's not more common, but it's because it's pretty available data. Crown leases, First Nation reserve boundaries. Now that does not include traditional territory and stuff like that. So this stuff is kind of I treat this more as private, but there is more restrictions to that. It's kind of a point of contention. It's getting a bit more. It's changing over time. So I'm gonna constantly be kind of revising this data set, I think.
Okay.
And now we have, parks. So I've just combined them, symbolized them all the same: national parks, provincial parks, regional green space, eco reserves, and protected areas. And so, yeah, you can hunt in some provincial parks, it turns out. That's not something I've never looked into, but it can be done. And some LEHs are exclusively limited entry hunt, for those that aren't familiar, are exclusively in some parks, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yep.
So yeah, we have the wildlife management units shown on the map. DFO actually gave me permission to use their subtitle management zones, which I spearfish, so I use it actually fairly frequently. Just making sure I have the correct map on here. So yeah, it's a bit similar to the wildlife management units, except it's for, you know, tidal fishing and stuff. And so, of course, just this is more for selfish purposes. Everyone that uses my maps is basic. There's absolutely no mariners, but I use these for diving and stuff all the time. And I recently just got a little inflatable striker boat, so I'm hoping to do some boat access hunting this fall, which would be good.
That's cool.
And doing a lot more. I've never been much of a boat person, so this is I'm learning by participating. So yeah, lots of nautical stuff. I got like rockfish conservation areas, so that's basically like no fishing, no fishing whatsoever. Rockfish are kind of at-risk species in BC, and I guess the Pacific. Kelp forests, really good for like lingcod and stuff. It just kind of indicates like a healthy ecosystem. You can see it from satellite imagery. Eelgrass beds, I use it for, it kind of indicates like a silty sediment bottom, and usually
Okay.
where river deltas meet the ocean. And Dungeness crabs like to bury themselves in that kind of sediment. So that's kind of when I'm hand harvesting while I'm diving, I typically kind of try to target these areas. So, oh yeah, new shooting, no shooting zones. I have these for the Fraser Valley Regional District right now, and a couple other areas, but I'm not just really pointing it out yet because it's obviously I want to have all of them before I really
Right.
start telling people that like, oh, you're not in one. But it's like, no, it's a slow and tedious process. I also have resource road channel zones coming up soon, so you could actually know what RR area you're in. So if you want to change your radio, your VHF channel.
That's
Um,
something else I'll give you a little bit of background on. So, up until a few years ago, the allocation of channels for resource roads was literally like one of the most obtuse things on the planet. And unless you were, and it's illegal to program your own radios, like federally illegal.
yeah.
And so, unless you have permission to get all the road channels, like you're an engineering company or a forestry consulting company or a logging company, you physically had no way to have access to those road channels. So, all those roads that you pull up and it says must call kilometers, recreational users were physically incapable of calling kilometers. For those of you who don't know, on a logging road, you are supposed to be calling your kilometers on the way in and your kilometers on the way out. And this allows other vehicular traffic, most notably loaded and unloaded logging trucks, to know where you are because they can't stop on a dime. So if you're calling, headed up at 5K and they're at 6K on the way down, they know somewhere in the middle they're going to run into a pickup truck and they can be going a little bit slower. And your responsibility is to clear. And you could say in the clear at 5.5, and they're gonna roll past you. In a great decision, the province decided to move to these amalgamated resource road channels. I think there's 40 of them. And I'm pretty sure you can take any road radio you want now into any mobile kind of communications consultant, like service provider, Fraser Valley Radios or whoever, and say, put the resource road channels on my radio. And then when you pull up to one of these logging roads and you will see like RR4, you know that they're on the resource road communications channel 4. So that was a great, and I think the amount of recreational traffic just started to get so large in a lot of these areas that they had no choice but to adapt the system. But that there's kind of like a little primer in why we have to call on roads and what channels they now use to call on roads.
Yeah, and with that in mind, something I've just another new addition to the map. You can see these little kind of light dash marks. I've made those to be for the 10-year roads anyways, to be basically 1 kilometer apart. So,
Perfect.
these kind of like snap to the road like routing services only work on when you have a data connection, right? And so it has to, and it also has to fetch this elevation data for you. So like it's, if you're driving and you just like, bear in mind, these are not kilometer markers. They just represent 1 kilometer. So if
Okay.
you kind of have an idea of where this truck is coming from, or if I want to, for example, if I want to just make this turn up here and I was back here, I could just count this quickly. I'd be like, okay, 1.25 kilometers. Okay. So for reset auto, 100, 1,400 meters or whatever. And so that's just so you're not messing around with your screens and stuff while you're driving or whatever. I like to just, be focused. You never know. You might see like a 4-point just run across the road. So,
No, I thought that was
yeah.
super handy. And like you say, it enables you to like just quickly estimate like, oh, how far to the end of this road? Or maybe I hit a fallen tree and there's something up the road I'm interested in looking at. It's like, is that a 500-meter walk or is it a 2-kilometer walk? It's like
Yeah,
real
exactly.
easy to just eyeball that out now.
Mhm. Now, an interesting thing, I guess, well, let's stick to the legend. I
Okay.
had something I wanted to mention before, but when I'm in the field, actually, I'll just do it quickly. So obviously map scales are changing in these applications, right? It's a dynamic scale. It's not a paper map would have the one scale, right? It'd be
Yep.
like 1 to 20,000. But so I know myself, like, and you can use this scale bar too, but you can use, if you want to do some like quick measuring. Like my compass obviously has a little ruler on it. So if you can get like an equivalent distance, like I know I try and basically shrink this scale bar to be 1 centimeter. And then I can use the centimeters on my compass to basically just measure it over my screen and say like, okay, so if 1 centimeter is 250 meters, then 10 centimeters is 2.5 kilometers. And then I can just kind of, what's my average slope over that range? And you can actually kind of set your bearings and get, put your clear compass on your phone and to kind of set your bearing like that, right? So it's kind of handy for navigating, because a lot of the, like, sometimes, you shouldn't be your head down looking at your screen while you're out there. This is like just to get you there. And then you keep your eye up, like set a bearing and just make sure you're walking in the right direction. And then if you're not just trying to walk in a straight line over a bunch of blowdown or something like that, if you're aware of your surroundings and you just, put your phone, like you're there already, you're in the woods, great. You're not going to be covering that much ground that quickly to have it matter for live GPS tracking. And it also kills your battery too. Yeah. So, using your head and not your phone is like,
I think that's a great point. I also think the more attention you pay on the way in, the better sense of where you are in your surroundings. Like when you're just following your phone for 2 miles, if you lose your phone at that point, I find your actual, awareness of where you are is very minimal. Like you don't really remember a whole lot of how you got. I tell this story all the time, but when I first started engineering, I was working with this guy named Les Disher. He's kind of famous on the coast. I used to call him Pissy Disher. And I was in the far north end of Vancouver Island, like the hell of Vancouver Island. And I think it was like day 2. And I'd been partying for months. So I'm like kind of hungover, kind of drying out in camp. Like it was not pleasant. And we're walking along and he goes, "Close your eyes." And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "I want you to describe to me everything about the last 100 meters. The type of rock, the slope, the terrain, the flora, what types of things were there." And I had nothing. I was like, I didn't even know where I was. Like I was so focused on just staying alive, walking around in the forest, that I was like, I had none of that information. But what that man taught me after kind of years of working up there was that there's a difference between passively just walking through the forest and actively like soaking in all, because as an engineer, you never know you're going to get to somewhere 2 kilometers later and be like, "Oh shit, that was actually a control point back there that I'm going to need to have a road go through," because now I realize there's no, and if you weren't paying attention at that time, you're not going to have that information in your memory bank in order to take access to. But I found that now that's just like baked in. When I walk around in the forest, I am actively engaged in kind of cataloging everything. There's a little like water pile. Oh, there's some down timber over there. There's some windfall over there. Like, and I think having a non-technological device like your compass that you're going to pull out of your pocket every 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how fast you're covering ground, and just picking a tree or a peak off in the distance that's roughly in your bearing and then sticking it away, frees up your mind to like be soaking in all that information instead of, I really like your point of having your head buried in your phone. I think you're going to miss so much of what's going on around you.
Yeah, because like, if you're trying to just go straight up this mountain, like this is what we're looking at here. This is like macro, right? You want to be like keeping like, what's your like kind of micro terrain like in front of you? You're taking the right steps. And honestly, like, you don't want to just sound like herd of elephants just breaking twigs and stuff everywhere. I move painfully slow when I'm walking through the timber, right? And it really, you really want to hear things and take note of stuff. And like, for example, just knowing like your tree species a bit better. Like if you're going for moose, you're obviously going to target kind of sprucier, wetter areas, right? And I mean, like, that's not obviously a blanket statement, but it's pretty true. And there's like moose, like red willows and stuff like that, right? That's lots of little things like that to target. And like, if you're like if you're harvesting like morel mushrooms, right? So that's just, I have some users that you basically use I have like some fire data on here. They usually target these burns, right? But it's about moisture too for mushrooms, right? Mushrooms need that moisture to grow. So here we have a burn. This is kind of looks like the moon landing is how I've done it. So I would be targeting obviously like the riparian areas, and kind of like because I have forest cover on my maps as well, so I would be targeting something that has, wetter vegetation like spruce.
Right.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to miss before I forget. Yeah, so back to the compass thing. Um, it's good to just like if let's say you're just walking on this road, we're just using Mount Christie as an example, right? And let's just say you're in the timber next to the road, but you can see this. You have like a visual reference point. You know it's on your left. You can just keep it there, keep your phone in your pocket, and just
Yep.
like that that's on your left, and you're not really going to miss any big land features if you're supposed to cross these two streams when you're crossing the north face of Mount Christie, right? So if Mount Christie's on your right, and you just have your landmarks, right? Like how much is really going to happen between these two streams to really justify, using your location on the device. So,
I never got lost until I moved to the Caribou to do forestry.
Really?
Because on the coast, I mean, up is left and down is right. And it's like, as long as the hill stays up that way, like in the mountains, it's actually very difficult to get lost because you have these baked in kind of visual reminders of like where you're going. When you get into the flats in the Caribou and like everything is just pine flats as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, and you have no sun.
Oh, it's crazy. And I would get turned around so much and swear I'm headed south and pull out the compass and I'm going north and I've backtracked half a kilometer. And yeah, it's crazy how much, not having those visual cues made it so much easier to get turned around.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So here we go. I switched regions to have a bit more going on. I think I was actually using my kind of off-roading maps before just to kind of talk about roads and cuts and stuff.
Perfect.
But now we're getting into the lower half of the legend, which is, so we've got the recent Clearcuts, the regular Clearcuts, and this year I've added south-facing Clearcuts. So basically, it's what it sounds like.
Now, why would that matter for people who don't understand? What would happen in a south-facing clear cut first, or that would not happen in a different clear cut?
Well, because it's south facing, and remember it's the average. I take the average slope of the kind of terrain within the boundaries of this clear cut, right? This 2011 one and the one above it are like on average is between what is it, 225 and 135 degrees sloping. So just because it's south facing, right, it gets more sun exposure. So your snow melt is going to be first and your vegetation green up is going to be first. And
Gotcha.
for, bears coming out of hibernation, it'd be a decent spot to look for them anyways.
Right.
Yeah, and now that also being said, if it is south facing, that means it's going to dry up first too. So you might want to rotate to the other side later in the season.
Yeah, I was really impressed. I thought that was the other thing is it's going to give you an idea. Like if you are on the same contour and it hasn't switched aspect, and there's like some little slides in the area, you could draw conclusions about if there's other broken areas in the timber where grass would be growing you can make other inferences based on this information that's not limited just to the clear cuts highlighted as well, that I think could be useful to you.
Exactly. This is all kind of serving to be like, okay, well, if we're targeting, like if we like, let's say on here, I have a bunch of like ungulate winter range and stuff like that, right? So I have mule deer winter range, for example, right? And you go let's find a mule deer symbol. Where I'm just looking at grizzly range right now, but I'm sure there's something there's usually in the fur, close to the water. We've got some moose down here in the flats. Scotch Creek, I'm not sure where this is actually. That's Shuswap Lake Park. Okay. Oh, Shuswap Lake, obviously. I'll try and find some mule deer for us here. Oh, here we go. Mule deer. Now, okay, so it's interesting that they have mule deer here, but it's not really that old of timber. So, okay, prove me wrong here. But what I'm typically looking for, so for example, here's some moose, and the trees are color coded to kind of represent the species. So we have some fir and balsam, or just fir and true fir. I have them color coded as the same, and then these kind of dots, these bright green dots, are birch. Birch in northern climates also can harbor the what is it called, chaga mushroom. It's high in antioxidants and stuff. So if you're into that sort of thing, quite valuable for its antioxidant properties. So yeah. So where were we? We're looking for just ungulate winter ranges. So this obviously it's for protection from like industrial activities, right? That doesn't mean that this is the only place you're going to find a moose, right? So that's basically when they amend an ungulate winter range and basically they log it, it has to be replaced somewhere else. And those like target levels of number of hectares dedicated to moose, mule deer, whatever, have to stay about the same. But when you look at these areas, if you were to actually go and explore, just take note, again, take note of what's around you. Like, why did some biologist designate this as, suitable mule deer winter range? And winter range is typically for like thermal cover for the winter. They leave bigger trees, and it's usually more mature timber. So that's kind of just a quick one for it. It differs depending on the species too. I was doing some research on mountain goat. And that's for them, it's more about snowpack and escape routes. So what the actual range of the slopes are. I'm not a huge whiz on goats, but yeah, I know you went on an alpine hunt. You went alpine goat hunt fairly recently, this last like November, did you not?
Yeah, a couple. I did my LEH tag for the first 2 weeks of January. I think I actually spent 20 days goat hunting this year, and I did 2 weeks on my LEH, and then I went to an over-the-counter area for another 8 days at the end of the season. And I noticed a strong correlation between identified. And here's the thing: sometimes when you're hunting, winter range isn't the most useful information because it's where they're going to be in the winter, not where they're going to be in the fall. So you can use it, but you got to kind of take it all with a grain of salt. With goats,
good for shed hunting.
Yeah, 100%. Now with goats, if you're winter hunting a goat, knowing where the goat winter range can be particularly useful. But I found a very strong correlation between prescribed winter goat range and the presence of goats. It was very strong. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't 1-to-1, but it was pretty dang close in the areas that I was in. So they've done a good job of, I don't know how the type of assessments that they can do, virtually, the quality and the accuracy of like getting slopes and diameters of trees and species, like, it still blows my mind, even though I did this stuff for so many years.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a lot more LiDAR data now, and the amount of stuff they can do with LiDAR is just mind blowing. So maybe that's where they're getting some of the more finer detail. I don't know, but it was highly accurate. I was really impressed.
Yeah. A lot of it, it is just kind of, you just set conditions, right? Like, oh, well, I'm looking for I don't know. I was just going to make up some species, but let's just say we're talking about grizzly range, and the grizzly range is different, but goats winter habitat is between, like 2,000 and 4,000 feet above sea level. And, we want south facing slopes close to water sources, maybe within like 500 to 600 meters. And then something that meets all of those parameters. Okay. And then electronically, just using the data that's available to be like, okay, so here are some winter ranges for goats or whatever. And then when it comes down to it, though, let's say, because I had a friend actually had a woodlot in the Caribou close to Horsefly Lake, and he was like, they wanted to dispute like the mule deer winter range there, and because it was done electronically based on the forest cover and the trees, because he obviously wants to like log some of the trees on in his woodlot, and but you have like you have to like selectively harvest, I think, in the. So you can't just take a bunch. And so, of course, they have to get a biologist to come, and then they field review it. And then he's like, I've never seen a buck, a mule deer here ever. And then this huge buck just walks out right in front of this lady. So we didn't get it. That's too bad, man. Yeah.
But back to the e-scouting notes, just a quick note on that. For instance, if you are planning a winter goat hunt, I think starting off looking for that winter goat range and then reverse engineering which stuff you have access to, I think is a great first step.
Yeah, I'll try and pick up some Region 6. I'll just import that right now. It might take a little minute because this one's almost 4 gigs. But yeah, so while we're just waiting for it to import here, what else we got? So, caribou, mountain goat, elk, moose, whitetail. It's not really used a lot, like as a data set. And it's a little bit in the Kootenays, a little bit in Region 7. I have it in there, but I rarely actually see it on the map. So let's just find some goats. So So basically, this is for syncing to your Gaia account. It just means that they don't want you syncing giant files and have them hosting it on their server.
Right.
So it's completely normal. So yeah, so I just imported it. It will show up down here, and there we go. So now we have the southern half of Region 6. Let's find us some goats. Oh, that was easy. There we go. Yeah. So I also have so I use the forest cover data for obviously the trees and the tree species, but they also have it basically just as this gray here, alpine designation. And typically it's pretty accurate because it was actually photo interpreted by the people that do the forest cover inventory are, I'll give them credit because it's quite monotonous work.
I can't even imagine.
Just
dude.
digitizing, like, you just going over imagery all the time. I almost bid on a contract for it, and I was like, you know what? I would.
Can you imagine
blow my
doing it
brains
back
out.
in the day with the stereoscopes? So before like satellite imagery even existed, like when I started doing layout in Holberg, we would actually go to a big filing cabinet and they had like flown planes over the whole TFL, and they would have like printed film pictures that they weren't 8x10, they were squares, maybe 8x8 or 10x10. And you would pick two almost identical photographs and you would lay them side by side. And then you had a stereoscope, which is like, kind of looks like these weird pair of goggles that sets up on a tripod. And you would put that over the top of these two printed film photographs. And it was like a magic eye thing would happen. Like by presenting two images side by side, it would pop into 3D. And it was crazy. Like you'd be seeing down in little chasms and you could see the individual trees. But like back in the day, that was how people decided forest cover and made all these decisions and put all this data on maps, was like literally visually verifying all of this stuff, which is just like mind blowing to me. Like the amount, just the sheer amount of effort that would take for something like an entire TFL is staggering.
Yeah, absolutely, and it kind of makes like, in the from the modern take on it. I'm basically just I'm a librarian as compared to those guys. So
100%.
yeah, I'm just compiling data. I call myself like because I'm not like making apps or whatever. I'm a sandwich artist, and this is my sandwich.
I like it. All right, back to goats.
Yeah, well, that's all I really have. I'm not an expert on goats. I think there's a guy, BC Billy's. He's like
Yep.
the authority on goats in BC.
Ed is another one. BC Billy's is on, that's Marv, and he's on Instagram, and then Mountain Addiction's on Instagram.
Oh, right.
Ed,
Yeah, I think he's
Thompson,
a user of mine as well.
He's another just fantastic resource for mountain goat information.
Yeah, and there's just so much out here. Hey, goats are fucking tough animals. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess just for those of you as well, just while you see these squares, these are mineral claims, and that's the claim number. So rather than like showing people if the claims are expired, who owns it, just you can go on MinFile and look up the claim yourself if you want to, and see if it's adjacent, see where your water sources and stuff are. Because I had a lot of guys actually message me, well, it'd be like, hey, are you going to add mineral tenures or just claims? And I was like, maybe. But, it depends how many. I don't think I know of a single person that's using it yet. So it's kind of like trap lines. It might be something that I just retire off the maps. I mean, it's not too intrusive, so it's okay. But it also kind of lets you know, I was like, there's people have been out there, right?
Well, and it's one of those things too, where sometimes you'll find like there's lots of things that aren't on maps. There's old seismic lines, really crazy like mineral claim trails and stuff where somebody took a skid steer and like built a 4-mile thing into some place so that they could dig some pit to test for something. And you'll like just randomly come across, and they make great little access trails and maybe nobody else even knows it's there. But sometimes those are linked to little weird things like that. So that can be kind of beneficial. Okay. I want to put a little bit of a pin in the e-scouting thing because I think we could do a whole episode about that.
Absolutely.
And I know we didn't get hyper specific, but I want to draw some high level conclusions. So
sure. Well, we're looking at one right now, right? 2018 Clearcut.
Yep.
Right. And goats right above. There's your access.
Yep.
Right? That's how I would do it anyways. You got a trail right here, similar thing. And they've retired parts of this road, but then someone else has walked it. So, it's obviously it's all subjective. You got to find what works, right? Or, if you have if you have some knowledge on what hunting goats really entails, and by all means, but more information is better than less, is what I always say. So,
What WMU is that?
oh, let's find out. 6'4".
Oh, okay. It almost looked like my it almost looked like my
hey.
LEH for a second, and I was like, I'm going to tell people you cannot
Take it down.
get up that snowmobile trail because I have tried and it's impossible. But no, it looks moderately different. But I think the big takeaway here is you have access to forest cover. So what type of forest cover is your species interested in? You have access to terrain information via contours. What type of terrain is your, species interested in? And then the other thing that I'm always looking for is like, what's the holy grail of access? Like, I want it reasonable enough that it's possible, but I don't want it so easy that there's going to be lots of pressure there. Like if you're hunting 400 yards off of a green FSR and it looks like a great spot to hunt, I guarantee you're going to run into other people hunting there. However, I've bitten off more than I can chew and decided to hike up and over this whole mountain. And it took me so long to get to the top that I literally spent one night at the top and had to come back down the next day. So again, we could say a lot more about e-scouting, but I think the purpose is, the one thing I like about Top Notch is it's not just, is there a road? It's not just, is there cover? Because for somebody who doesn't know what they're looking at, that's all satellite imagery is ever going to give you. And I know everybody loves it because it looks real, but like it's just green for trees and no green for a road. And that really is limiting the amount of decisions that you could be making at home that could save you time. If you're to use something like this, that's a little more full featured. I think you're going to spend less time just driving around or hiking around, wasting time.
Yeah. So, obviously, like the younger trees are basically grow close together until they basically outcompete each other and so on. So that's typically, I'm just trying to avoid the immature stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, I've also shown, just these are actually from the priority deferrals this year, but big tree old growth, ancient old growth. So that depends on the natural disturbance type of the area. Old growth for like the Liard Plains, for example, is considered to be over, I think it's 120 plus years old because it burns basically every 125 years. Right. It's just kind of like a fire plain for that area. Versus the coast, they're going to say like 250 or 140 plus or something along those lines. I'm sorry, I was thinking for pine. Anyways, I digress. So that's kind of where like Ty from Wilderness Locals made a good point. He's like, yeah, the old growth, man, because like I'm not in a clear cut, obviously I'm walking the timber. But I also just want to know, like, I can walk through these bigger trees a bit better. But like similar to a clear cut, though, the deer are often hanging out on the edges, just like so that they have an escape route into the thick shit. And
there's rarely food in there. So what you need to realize about old growth is that the reason it's spaced out is that the canopy is closed. And that was the point you alluded to earlier about the different succession phases. Once that canopy closes off, all that undergrowth dies away. And what that means for most species is the food also goes away. So if you're in the old growth, and I've killed blacktails, one of the things we target here on the coast is old growth hemlock. If you're in there, you need to ascertain the presence of those key features that the deer is going to need somewhere in proximity. They're going to need a food source. They're going to need a water source. They're going to need a bedding source. So if you can find those interspersed amongst that, that's kind of like the holy grail of what you're looking for.
Yeah. Exactly. So here we have kind of a mix of fir and hemlock here on the coast is how I've the kind of lighter green, right? And with this dark patch indicates that it's old growth. And at the peak of this mountain, probably it gets a little high, a little dry, and doesn't really meet that definition because it's just because of its altitude or whatever. It's just not as good of a growing site.
And I would like to make the same note about burns. Lots of people think big burn, great, lots of room. Not necessarily the case, because given the year of the burn, it could just mean a bunch of wasted space for the animals that has no food or has too much windfall to create efficient travel routes. Mm-hmm. You're going to be looking for like the broken areas in the burn or where the burn gets thin so that it's transitioning from burn not to burn, back to burn, because it's that edge effect and it's the transition between the different layers that's going to provide the most attractive habitat for those animals. A good buddy of mine just spent 2 days walking around a burn, and he found 90% of the animal traffic located to this one little 400-yard area in like a multiple square mile burn. If he hadn't spent the time and hung some cams, it was essentially a dead zone, except for one little area that just had enough feed and enough water and enough living stuff that it was attractive enough to them.
Yeah. And here we've got basically the Lytton fire from 2021, basically. And we know this fire was really intense, just nuked the whole place, right?
Yep.
And so I show the fire year, obviously, to kind of give you an idea. And it was probably just absolutely creamed out for mushrooms at that time. And I just thought I'd just point out, just with, like, I know everyone, like we just said, people love their satellite imagery, but we know for a fact that this was absolutely just incinerated.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm sure the imagery is real, but you can't really beat the kind of vectorized data sets, like in terms of like the actual tabular information that's there. We know that burnt in 2021, right? Yep. And we know those clear cuts are there. You have an exact
And that's
date.
not old data. I wouldn't expect visual imagery for an entire province to be updated every 2 years. I mean, that's just insanity. So you could be looking at very, relatively speaking, new data. It could be 2020. That could have been the year before the burn, and a 3-year-old data set for visual imagery would be considered quite accurate for most applications. I think that's a great point, which is another reason why I think I realize we don't want to overload our phone with apps, but that's why I'll flip back and forth between Onyx and Fat Maps and your stuff, is because they're all pulling from different locations and sometimes different stuff. And it could be different times of year. Some stuff will be caught during the winter and it's like useless because everything's covered in snow. And then you flip over to Onyx and they've got summer data on theirs, and it's not useless. So I think that's another point to highlight. Yeah,
and I'm not going to sit here and just pretend I don't use other things and that like this is the best. You know what I mean? The whole point is that I'm combining resources, right? And I have Google Maps, I have Mapbox, I have all the things too, right? But I know this. The thing is, I have control over this, right? And so basically, you just have to put your faith in the idea that I update this a couple times a year. And it's just another take on it, right? Like I'm sure ONX, I think they do that in the States for some of their data. They have like forestry data and stuff like that. But as far as I know, in BC, no one else is even trying. And
that's the thing for BC guys. Like I hunt a lot in the States, and the mapping apps down there, because they have the density of client base, are far superior. I'll give them some credit. Like there's some really great, their forest fire data is great. Like a lot, their private and public data is great. And Onyx has started adding a couple features for Canada. We've got Topo now, which we only got this year. We got WMUs, which we just got. They added the outfitter information, which is interesting, but it's still real bare bones compared to what you get if you were walking around Montana or Wyoming, which is why I think in particular for BC residents, I think the iHunter app is okay. And I think there's another couple local apps that do also a good job, but that's why I think this is such a critical, and the weird part is I'm telling you right now, it's not until you start to use Top Notch that you actually realize how useful it is. Like it starts solving problems for you didn't know you had, and then you start using it on a regular basis, and it's like, oh my God, like here's a new feature that is like I'm finding really useful that I didn't even know I wanted.
Yeah, I do that to myself with it all the time, because obviously I make it, and then I don't have all the resources to go to all these places and stuff like that, right? And like I live on an island that doesn't really light on fire as much. But for example, like here's another one. Like, so we know that this burned, right? And it was previously, and we know also what the forest cover used to be, because sometimes that forest cover, they don't update it for the depletion that the fire created. But I updated that. So anyway, so we know that it was, fir, pine, and it was a mule deer range there as well. And since that burned, this is a new feature actually. These green outlines are active and pending cut permit submissions. So that basically,
so they're doing salvage logging in there.
Yeah, exactly. So that hasn't even happened yet. So you are basically guaranteed to see some industrial traffic in there, and it's going to be noisy, and everything's going to be staying the hell away from that place. right? So,
But going in there where that's done and having a shortcut on some decent roads to get to that rest of that burn is going to be a great future spot, maybe 3 to 5 years down the road when that burn starts to grow in.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as they actually create these openings in the in the landscape, it actually gets retired to another data set, and then it will appear like this once it's actually harvested and it has its kind of opening creation date.
Even just knowing there's salvage logging going on there is an interesting data point because that tells you something about the quality of fire that occurred. Yeah. Like if you get the type of destructive force of the Lytton fire, nobody's salvaging anything in there.
Hardly at all. Look at this.
Looks like the moon.
Yeah, exactly. And then now let's go back to the Okanagan. There was just a ton happened over there because they got that's the same fire year, I guess. Where are we here? Yeah, here. Let's find. So see all these green patches. Like there is a lot more hard salvage took place, right? Yeah. Like it's a little bit burnt, but they still take the trees afterwards.
Yep. Yeah, I did some of that layout too, up in the Caribou. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to be cognizant of time, and there's still like kind of a one main topic and then a couple Q&As that I want to get to. Let's talk briefly about route planning for hiking. So let's find a little area and let's say, okay, we got to the end of this road. Here's a little area of subalpine that I want to get into. Let's walk through the process of like, based on our little e-scouting here, what would be most likely the most efficient route to get to the top? Because I find for people who haven't kind of lived in the land of topo maps, a straight line is very rarely, if ever, the best route between two locations.
Yeah, sure. So I guess this is just a random example to just be unbiased. So I think this is like a seam between two layers, actually, two different maps, but that's okay. So maybe get rid of this line. So let's just say we're trying to get right here, right? It's fairly straightforward to me anyway. Yep. So I guess you want to factor in your weight and the speed that you can carry. And let's say we're coming in and we can only get to about halfway up this road, right? Now, I can tell just from this is kind of like a mountain crested thing, and it's quite steep, right? And for just calculating your slope and knowing what that means in terms of your abilities. So like to calculate your slope percentage, just rise over run. So if you go, if there's a 200 meter elevation gain over 100 meters, is 50% slope, right? So,
which is quite challenging. Like let's talk a moment, because a lot of people aren't going to understand percentage slopes, and I'm going to give people a fairly
don't push 30 if you have gear.
Yeah. And think about it in roads. So for an average logging road that has on-highway logging trucks, they prefer you to limit favorable grades to 12% and adverse grades to 6%, which means an empty logging truck can drive up a 12% grade and a full drive logging truck can drive up a 6% grade, which means for the most part, kind of the steepest slopes you're going to see on highway based logging roads are 12%. And when you walk up that, your calves are burning. Like walking up 12%, you feel it, especially if you've got a pack on. Now, when you start getting on the coast and you start having off highway logging trucks and you start dealing with like private licensees that are a little bit more aggressive, you can get upwards of 18 and 20%. But I would hazard a guess that the steepest slope you have ever seen as a normal recreational individual in British Columbia on a logging road would be 20%. And just to give you an idea. So if you're going to be covering 2 or 3 miles at an average slope of 20%, that is a grind. And as soon as you start getting north of, and here's another thing to put into context, and please call me out if I'm wrong on this, Mason, but 100% is 45 degrees, correct?
Yeah, basically that would just be 100 up, 100 out. Yeah. And then that's, so you can go over 100%. Right?
Yeah. And that's the weird part for people to understand. Mm-hmm. But if you tried to physically walk up, and the other way I like to point it is that a lot of people's wingspan, no, that doesn't equal. You wouldn't touch the side. But anyways, walking up a 45 degree slope, it is insanity. Like I know in your mind, you think, oh, 45 is half a 90. It doesn't, like, when you're actually out in the forest, walking up a 45-degree slope is not like, you're going to be doing switchbacks. You are not walking straight up a 45-degree slope. You're going to walk 50 meters this way and 50 meters back this way. So just to put things in context, as soon as stuff gets north of,
30, 35, like,
especially with a full pack, like that's going to be a slog. It's doable. You know what I mean? But, and the other thing I would like to call out is that's going to be your average slope. So if you can see areas along your hike where your slope is only visibly 10 to 15%, that means you're going to have equal areas where your slope is 50 to 60%. And so, that's something to work out. But
where you want to keep your head out of your phone and just like look for these like little footholds and stuff. It's not going to be you're really going to have to conserve your efforts to just find a better route and just not, just walk into somewhere you don't want to be. Right. And so like, let's say this, like, go ahead.
No. Oh, okay. The only thing the only thing I was going to add is that, and again, this is 1 to 25,000. So there are tighter contour maps to be found, but you can still get a very good idea of where your ridges and where your bowls are. Yeah. And one of the things I always try and tell people is, like, you want to ride contour lines as long as you can. So let's say, see that purple road, go back. Yeah, right there. Let's say you're there and you want to get up to that ridge. Very rarely are you going to walk at like an east bearing and kind of go straight up that hill. Like, you can see where that saddle is just above where that bear icon is. And you would cut an angle, kind of taking your time to cross as few of those contour lines at once as possible, because that is going to spread out your rise over a greater run. Yeah, 100%. Beautiful. So that's exactly.
You want to avoid these streams, obviously, and these pinches, because you might want to.
Great point. That's like, people also think, because sometimes on the contour map, those can actually look favorable because they'll widen out. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee, especially at 1 to 25K, that is going to be deeply incised. There's going to be material and boulders and exposed rock, and like walking up that creek is going to be an absolute, and it's probably going to have very incised walls. Like, you're going to want to probably be like 30, 40 meters back off the center line of that creek. And then probably at that edge is probably a very nice section to walk, and that's probably where you'll find game trails as well.
Yeah, and for myself, if I really was like doing a multi-day thing, if I'm looking at it more being realistic, like, I would probably start at this high point here and kind of like just stay up, right?
Yep.
I mean, coming down, this would probably suck actually, but then you can just like actually cover a lot of ground, do a lot of viewing, and at any given point you're not much. So that's about 500 meters. You're only a few kilometers away. So, I mean, it's still quite steep, but it's not that crazy. And then you'd at least have some view down here. And it kind of gives you an idea. Maybe you want to hit up, if you're doing a multi-day campaign, you want to have an idea of where your nearest water sources are. Right?
Yep.
And if it's going to be like glacial silt that you're filtering, or if you're actually going to have running streams, might change like the kind of drinking system you're using.
And, okay, so just south of where you finished your red line is an interesting feature I want to draw people's attention to. Here? There's kind of like, if we come south, just maybe like a half an inch or something from there, you see that kind of exposed flat. Like, that's probably, you might be able to glass from there. Like, the fact that it goes out on that, we'd call that a bench, is probably favorable. Also, you'll notice there's a ridge line running up to that bench. Ridge lines where the contours tend to tighten up can also be favorable walking, because it's kind of where the two edges of the ridge meet, and lots of times you'll find game trails there, and that can also make for favorable walking. I take this so for granted because I spent so many years of my life, like they say, intuition is really just pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. And I think it was one of the reasons I got so good at designing roads is that I'd been a tree planter for almost 10 years driving logging roads. So my brain just saw forest in roads. Like when I saw a bench, I'm like, that looks like where you would put a road, because I've seen 20,000 miles of logging roads built on benches just like that.
Yeah, and animals don't want to work harder than they have to.
100%.
Right?
100. They're going to go where there's the cover gets opening, the brush isn't too thick, the terrain's not too steep. But this is the other reason why I want to inspire people to pay attention to what's going on. Because every time you're walking through the forest and you're cataloging, oh, this is what it looked like on the map. This is what it looked like in reality. That's one more data point that you're logging into your brain so that the next time you're out in the forest, your intuition, your pattern recognition is going to be more successful at pre-identifying the most efficient route. And you might have to make a couple adjustments here and there because no one's going to guess perfectly the first time around. But the more data we can enter into our brains, the better we're going to get at predicting the most favorable route. And it gets to the point where I can just look at a topo map and I'll tell you right away where I don't want to go. Like, I'm not going up that face. I'm not. Yeah, 100%.
If you're killing yourself, you're probably not even in a good spot to find wildlife anyways.
Yes. Yeah. I think
and like, even if you do, point. What are you going to do about it? You're dying on these slopes and stuff, right? And then you think you're going to have an easier time recovering. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's I don't like to work any harder than I have to either. But,
I also think it really ties into our road conversation earlier, because especially in areas that are heavily populated with resource roads, you're going to most times have multiple options. There's going to be a close option, a kind of further away option, an option that comes in from the west, an option that comes in from the south. And I think if you tie what we were talking to about the resource roads in with now what we're talking about efficient routes through contours, there might be walking 3 miles in from the west might be better than walking a half a mile in from the east, depending on what the route is like. And I think that's the benefit of e-scouting. Do you know what I mean? Like, map these areas out. Do exactly what Mason is doing. I do this at home all the time. Like, draw lines, put waypoints, put them both on the map and then start doing the math. Okay, what's my rise over run on this one? What's my rise over run on that one? How far is this one? How far is that one? How many creek crossings do I have? Go look at some sat imagery. Do I have any exposed rocky faces anywhere that could be unstable and unpassable?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, it's like if you spend as much time looking at maps as myself or yourself, it just as kind of naturally, it's kind of easy to get lost into it. But and then, it can be a bit overwhelming, especially like some people will be like, there's just way too much on your maps. I'm like, ugh, sorry, man. I don't know.
No,
but I mean,
I would disagree. I think it's, but then again, maybe it's because I'm used to it. One last feature I want to put that. So Mason just did a really good job right at the beginning of his red line, basically just to the north of the purple road. You see how there's a bear icon to the northwest and then a bear icon to the northeast. Right in the middle of those, stop drawing now. Right in the middle of those two bear icons is what you would call a saddle. You can see the one peak to the east and the one ridge line to the west. And you can tell that there's like a bowl or a saddle connecting to those 2 points. That's another feature that I want to draw people's attention to, because saddles tend to be very navigable. Like, I don't know much about geology and how things are formed, but that's the other thing. The more time you spend walking around in the woods, the better you get at just knowing why certain areas are going to be easier to walk around than others. But like, saddles are one of those things you shoot for, because if you can get to a saddle from the bottom, 99% of the time, you're going to be able to get up the sides of the saddle to the two peaks. And then you're going to be able to run that ridge line the length of whatever it is you're looking to run. So those are something my brain kind of leaps to. And you can tell the way Mason drew that line, his brain leapt the same way. Like, it's just something that pops out of your eye is what you want to aim for. Yeah, like, there's a perfect scouting route. You know what I'm saying? Try and get the truck or the quad to the end of the purple, hike up to the saddle. You could even drop some of your weight at the saddle. Then you hike to one of the first ridge points. Then you hike to one of the second ridge points. Like, depending on how much time and how much weight you got, this could be a multi-day. It could be a really long day, but that would be a fantastic scouting trip right there, what you just laid out. Like,
and
that's
like, another thing to know about this too is that, like, we don't really know the condition of these roads, but if you have a quad, like
Yep.
really, like you might be able to just get up here, glass something, and recover it from the other side.
Yep.
Right?
Totally. How are you doing for time, man? We're going way over here.
You can talk about it endlessly. I'm good if you are, though. If you have more questions, just to kind of like wrap things up. But I think we've covered most of the bases for the purpose of you know, GIS hunting and mapping applications.
I agree. I'm quite happy with what we got to cover, but I do want to. We're not going to get to all of these guys, and maybe Mason is going to be good enough to come on here, and we can do a round two at another point. But I want to jump in and hit up some of the highlight questions. So if I don't get to yours, I apologize. Send it to me later. Mason is also really great. So if you send him a message, I'm sure he's more than happy to answer a question for you.
Yeah, hit me up.
Okay, BC further asks, will he add or highlight roads that end once they enter into a Wildlife Act motor vehicle ban area?
It's a good question. It's one of those. It's on the list. I actually have the motor. Like I won't. I don't think I will. That's a good idea to actually highlight the road itself. I was initially just going to show the boundaries of the motor vehicle closures, and because like I guess if you want to change it, I try and keep the roads looking relatively like for just that purpose. Probably, yeah. I mean, motor vehicle closures are high on the list. That no shooting areas and radio channel zones are like the three of my targets right now.
So future feature set.
Yep.
Do you have any particular tips on how to faithfully locate water sources? And I'm going to say ones that are a little more permanent. Like I'm a sheep hunter. Anybody can find water in October or March. Finding water in August is another one. Have you noticed any correlation between like size or location that like would at least give you a little more confidence that this is probably a water source that's more likely to be present during a drier period of time?
Yeah, so I was actually going to touch on this as a kind of a future thing that I actually meant to add it this year, but I totally forgot. But different, like kind of, I'm going to change the thickness of streams based on the stream order classification. So it's something we do in forestry. Like, okay, it's ranked on basically on size and whether it has fish or not from S1 to S6. Yep. And then there's also called an NCD, which is a non-classified drainage, which the vast majority of these on these like further reaches will be NCD. So like later in the season, it might just be completely underground at that point.
And those are just based on terrain. People have literally just drawn that blue line because the contours indicate that if there was water, that's where it would be flowing, not to indicate that there's always the presence of water there.
It's actually kind of gravity driven based on the elevation model, right? So it's this kind of that's how it kind of determines like, okay, what's the accumulation of the water in that basin. So like that's another thing is like kind of how high up is this stream coming from above you, and kind of factor in the what's the temperature going to be up there. Do you still have like active melt, is there a water body that looks like it's coming from? So basically I would I would be a little bit suspicious of these streams later in the year.
Yeah.
Right. But this kind of one obviously is just a main drainage for everything else. So, I would definitely kind of rely on that. And I do plan to change. Maybe I'll make it a different color, darker blue or something like that in versions going forward.
Okay. There's a couple here that I'll just answer quickly. How to find an ideal glassing location. This is one where satellite image does help because you need the lack of trees, because you can hike up to the tallest point on the map. And if you're in the middle of thick forest cover, which the subalpine can sometimes have, it's not going to help. And one trick I'll give about Google Earth is that if you grab the little man icon in the upper right-hand corner of Google Earth and draw it down, it will let you see what things look like when you're standing at a particular location. Now, it's not perfect because they're going to model tree heights and other type of stuff, but it is certainly perfect, just like this. So obviously this is a terrible glassing location because,
turn some stuff on. But
well, and that's the other thing. Maybe we're down at the bottom. I made an assumption that we'd be at the top looking down. Lots of times, especially if you're driving around, you're going to be at the bottom looking up. So, there was a little peak over there to the right that was, not bad at all that you would be able to glass from the bottom. But this, again, ground truth everything, but this is another tool that's going to give you a bit more confidence about where a good glassing location would
Oh, and
be
here's a quick freebie for you Google Earth users as well that I find very helpful in, like, for example, in the Caribou, or the Chilcotin rather, where it's not very steep terrain. Is if you go into your options here using it on the computer, you can exaggerate your slope.
Yeah.
And then it'll make those benches and stuff a lot more obvious. Right. So you just basically, now your rise over run is doubled. And so now you can kind of see these things. This will probably reflect what it actually looks like on the ground to you a bit better.
My experience is 1.5 is way closer to reality than leaving it alone. So I've left my Google, because the problem is your eyes will get bigger than your stomach and you'll see these roots and you're like, oh, that's totally doable. And then you get in the field and you're like, what is this horse shit?
Yeah, it looked like nothing. Right?
This is crazy. This didn't look like, and so I find I put my Google Earth on 1.5 and that gives me a much more realistic appraisal for how steep things are going to be out in the field.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone says, is it best to glass as you hike to camp or hike straight to camp and then glass afterwards? That's a case-by-case basis. I'm going to say this is why a good pair of binos is nice, because I would do like some quick little glassing, but then I am going to limit the amount of times that I set up my spotter and all that other kind of stuff if I'm trying to make miles and get to some place and it's also lots of times while you're hiking, you're not going to have a favorable glassing location because the best hiking routes don't make the best glassing routes. So
yeah, I agree with you on that. It really just kind of depends on the kind of hunting you're doing.
Oh, you mentioned showing gates. Now, I'm sure I actually did a big rant about this on Instagram the other day or on one of my vlogs because I got to some place. And for people who don't know, blocking access to Crown land is technically not legal in British Columbia, but there's like really no policing force for this. And lots of licensees and other resource incentivized individual put up gates all over the place all the time. And you run into them.
Especially where I live. It's a big thing.
The island's crazy.
Yeah, you basically just like lost half of it. Okay.
The weird part there too is depending on who you know and like there's some friendlier licensees on the island that if you're willing to go like do a little course, they'll give you a couple keys and stuff. But it's so A, does the app show gates, and B, what type of like grain of salt should people be taking that with? Because obviously there's no legal requirement to submit gate data as far as I'm
no, there isn't a central like authority for gates and stuff like that. I mean, like, for example, you see this whole thing, it's just like, this is all private, all purples. That's the Mosaic, like Timber West Island timberlands. So that whole area is basically private land just by definition, and they have the right to gate it. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of legal from a legal standpoint. So they'll put gates wherever they like. Now public property and stuff like First Nations can put up gates to certain areas. And like, what's the legal standing of it? I know it's a point of huge contention, and I honestly don't really want to get into it because it's like people get pretty worked up about it around here. But I don't know. It's not really worth my effort to mess with built structures and stuff. You know what I mean? I'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's why scouting, like e-scouting is one step, scouting is another step, and keep good data on your phone. Like when you run into gates, write yourself a little note about it, what the state of the gate was. Like if it's a brand new, freshly concrete poured, big old yellow jobby, that thing ain't going nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Like you're done. There's other temporary gates that you can tell might be gone in a year or two, and it's worth going and checking again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they're just doing it so people don't like vandalize equipment or something like that, right? And then they pull it later.
Yeah, totally. And that's what you see quite often. And I think the other, different stakeholders is the other one, and that gets a little bit trickier. And then even if you are technically allowed past that gate, I might not want to leave my truck there indicating that I'm past that gate for 3 or 4 days because you might have some not great news when you get back to your truck. So I think,
I don't know if it's worth it. It's up to you.
The other thing that I've come to the conclusion, because I film a lot of my stuff and I put it out afterwards, it's just not worth the risk, because I do my research, but maybe I am in some area where I shouldn't be. Like I can't I lose that 100% confidence that I'm okay to be where I am. And if I'm going to record it and share it, if you're going to kill something and take a picture afterwards, recognize that people can find out where that was. So I would be very hesitant, if you're going to go across a gate somehow, just understand, be very confident that you're allowed to be where you are, because there could be something going on that you're unaware of that means you shouldn't be on the other side of that gate.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, if you really need to get to that spot so bad. I mean, on an island like where I live, that's like, a bit more competitive, in like less space, and I guess and more populous lower mainland and stuff. That just more gates going up for various reasons, right? But yeah, I don't know. I just find somewhere else. I'm not trying to go. If it's popular enough to warrant a gate, then I don't think I really need to bother myself with it.
No, I think that's a great point. My God, man, that was a beefy podcast. I want to respect your time. We're going to wrap things up. But is there anything else? Okay, remind everybody right away, Mindful Hunter for 20% off. So please take advantage of that. And thank you again for that, Mason. That's deeply appreciated.
I'm happy to grow the team.
Anything else that we didn't mention or you want to share about Top Notch, I will make sure to include links to the social media, the Top Notch Nav website, all that kind of stuff. I will also link, if I can remember to do it, the podcast you did with Wilderness Locals, because I'm sure there was some information on that wasn't, and Ty's a good buddy, and they're friends of the podcast, so I want to support their stuff as well. But yeah, anything else that you want to touch on or share before we wrap this up?
One last thing, I actually started just doing exclusive discounts for local kind of volunteer and stakeholder groups. So I added a section to my website called Promotions and Affiliates. So I've got some BC Search and Rescue Association volunteers, Four-Wheel Drive Association members, Wild Sheep Society members. I think I'm going to add a couple others in the near future. Just gotta reach out to people, make sure it's all good. And just send me a screenshot of your membership if you're a part of any of these. Wild Sheep Society does a lot of good. So does Four-Wheel Drive. They do a lot of bush cleanups and so on. And search and rescue members, they volunteer a lot of their time. So by all means, just reach out and you can get a discount code as well.
Fantastic. All right, Mason. Thank you very much, my friend. That was very educational even for myself. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a use out of that. So thank you again for making the time.
Yeah, cheers. No, it was great. I love, I can only talk to myself about it and so much, right? It's good to get some, it's so rewarding just to see where people take themselves with this stuff, right? So,
dude, it's really cool what you built, man. Like, as a bit of a map nerd who spent, a decade and a half of my life kind of building maps, obviously nothing to this scale. I can still remember when I got my final block maps that I would submit, you feel so proud because it's it's all tied together geospatially and it all closed within a certain margin of error and the legend's pretty and it's it takes this thing that's kind of nothing, because when you don't have a map of it, it's the unknown, and it turns it into this navigable thing. And there's it just feels different afterwards. So to create what you've created at the scale, I mean, man, very impressive. Solid work, dude. Very impressive.
Thank you, man. It's been very rewarding, especially when you make a map and people use a map, they expect it to be real, and you go somewhere and you'll be and it's not as described. So obviously I can't be everywhere at once. So you have people in region 7, region 4, region 8, and then you send you a photo dude, I would pay you to take this road off the maps. Right. Maybe I'd start doing take bribes for that sort of thing, hide access for people. But
that's hilarious.
Yeah, super cool. Anyways, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'd love to be back sometime so we can kind of dive deeper into some other topics. And cheers to all the listeners and users. Thanks for kind of sticking it out and listening to us dork out about maps and geography.
That's awesome, man. All right, we'll chat again soon. Thanks, Mason.
Yeah, take care, Jay.